leaving the comfort of the original corporate job and, finding my way along this path that just has been anything but a clear cut, like I knew for sure this was the right thing because this is where I was meant to go.
All right, folks, we are here with Danny Blue. Danny is down in the SoCal area. I'll let him talk more about that. But I met Danny last year when he made a choice to go out and take on the rite of passage through the Compass program. And we've gotten to connect here and there since then. And I'm super excited to have him on the show and talk about nature connection and how that has shown up for you. So welcome, Danny.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah. So first thing, I've said it before, I haven't said it in a while, but in general, I really try to shy away from the whole, setting somebody up with all their intro of other things they've done. So what I prefer to do is just, one of the questions is how would your closest friends or your family or your loved ones, how would they describe you?
Good question. I would say anyone that knows me really well would describe me as somebody who has kind of like an insatiable desire for peeking behind the curtain of life, not taking everything at face value. I've always been somewhat of a rebel since the early teen years, and now that same energy is kind of translated into this more of this kind of curious spirit. There's so much going on in the world these days, and there's so much chaos and noise, and it's very easy to get pulled into a particular specific dogmatic belief about anything that's happening. And I think that one of the things that I really hold dear as a value of mine is to just stay curious. I tell people a lot of times, my mantra is maybe, to anything. Somebody says anything, maybe. And that's served me pretty well. I think that, it's hard to not form particular beliefs or judgments about the world. And so that's one of the ways in which I try to stay as much as I can above the noise. It's just staying curious and being open to learning and seeing the world through other people's eyes as much as possible.
Yeah, great. I resonate with that for sure. That's actually one of the gifts I claim to remind me of who I am, which is being curious. I definitely go out there myself, and it's so easy to like have a driver do something stupid and just judge them in the moment, not to be thinking about their story or whatever.
Well, I'll tell you what, the freeway is still my ultimate battleground, my ultimate testing ground for this wisdom, because I'm far from having made it to where if there's a destination that I'm trying to get to, and it's always brought to my awareness on the freeway.
Who knew that the ultimate spiritual battlefield would be the highways, right?
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah. Awesome. And then what would you say is your, how do you show up in the world? What's your, what's the characteristics? Are you kind of aggressive and bold? Are you, more gentle and calm? Like, what's your MO out there when you're just hitting the street and doing what you do and encountering people?
I started my journey, if you will, on this path of spirituality and self-awareness and just deepening my connection to purpose and the reason why we exist about 8 or 9 years ago. And, along that path, I really started working a lot with various different plant medicines. And I think that within that, I noticed a couple years ago that it had really opened up that feminine side of the energetics within me. And I noticed, I'd really been moving through the world in more of that just kind of open creative space of just wanting to kind of, see what's over here and see what's over here. And it's only been over the past couple years that I've really begun deepening a practice into cultivating a more grounded masculine energy to balance that side of me out. And it's really it really motivates me quite a bit. And I'm learning to really love the pursuit of discipline, because it's definitely one of the things that I have not mastered yet, if that's something that can be fully mastered. But it's a trait that I see more and more how crucial it is, to cultivate true freedom through discipline, which always seemed like a paradox to me. It's like freedom is being able to do whatever I want, whenever I want. But when you learn that actually having discipline and creating systems and creating a foundation and being able to be grounded in a particular vision that you're wanting to create, it's really interesting how the idea of freedom takes on such a more bold meaning. So that's kind of how I'm flowing through life these days.
Yeah. What would you say two questions come up for me right now. Would you say would you attribute it to the masculine expression? You talked about some of these more masculine attributes kind of coming out. Would you say that's one of them? And if so, what other ones might be coming along with that one to sort of create this, place you're in?
That's a good question. I definitely attribute the idea and the trait of discipline to the masculine energy, really being able to cultivate a strong foundation and, sacrifice short-term feelings and gains and whatever it is that you're in the pursuit of, in exchange for something that is available through a much longer commitment to a bigger vision. Other masculine traits within that, I think integrity feels like a big one for me. But what's interesting about integrity is that's probably been one of the core traits that, even when I was like, ayahuasca ceremony after ayahuasca ceremony, and really like expanding into this just ultra expressive, creative, feminine energy that would come through with a lot of that. Integrity was always one of the core foundational traits that has really guided my entire life. I can't remember a time where that never felt resonant for me. And coming from an Israeli Jewish mother, I think that Jewish guilt has been one of my biggest teachers as I continue to dive deeper into those energies of shame and guilt, and understanding how they direct my life in various different ways that might not serve me. But I guess you could say that if there was a silver lining of that particular trait showing up for me a lot, is really ensuring that I'm constantly staying in integrity, because it's just I just there's something physically in my body that that does not agree with me when I start to move in a direction that feels like it would be an easy way to go and support me in a way that maybe I'm looking to be supported financially or otherwise. But know that it's something that I'll think about for the rest of my life. So
yeah, I like that. That's good. Good picture about this Jewish mother, kind of playing into all that, which leads me right into our next question. So what is your history? What is your lineage? Where do your people come from? How far back have you been able to figure that out? And to what degree do you have a sense of identity still connected to that, if at all?
Oh man, it's such a good question. And it's something that I've been more and more curious in developing a deeper connection to as I get older. And I haven't really had a ton of awareness or connection to that in the past, but over the past few years, I've started to deepen that. Like I said, my mom is Israeli. Her whole side of the family comes from Poland and some of the surrounding areas, and her lineage, I think from her grandparents around that generation, the vast majority of them were killed during the Holocaust, and those that escaped ended up in Israel and America. So that's probably one of the most resonant parts of my lineage that I connect the most with. I don't have as much of an awareness around my dad's side. I know that there's some Eastern European, if you go back far enough, but my dad grew up in the South in Atlanta, which is where I grew up as well. And so, I always joke around me. It's like I'm like the perfect mutt. I've got an Israeli mother and a Southern American father, born in Georgia. I was born in North Carolina, and so yeah, there's a lot to continue to discover and unpack with that. I mean, even just specifically around the genetic trauma that is probably ancestral trauma that is probably encoded deep in my DNA from my ancestors that were around at that time of the Holocaust.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely something that I'm really, really curious about continuing to deepen and kind of dig further into to understand better, myself through that.
Yeah. It's good to hear. Do you have any personal traditions or practices that you still, keep in your life, whether it's something adhering to a spiritual practice or just something traditional that particularly, I guess, your mom, since it sounds like she maybe had more of a cultural impact on your youth, that you still keep in your life?
Yeah, well, it's really interesting because obviously I grew up Jewish. My dad's side of the family was Jewish as well, so I grew up Jewish, and it it always felt to me as I was growing up that I was more connected culturally to the Jewish faith through my experience with going to Israel and connecting with my family in Israel. We used to go every other year, and there was something really special about that time to me. But I never really understood Judaism or religion as something that was a faith that I had this deep connection to. As a matter of fact, it's interesting because I was never very religious growing up. We would go to the synagogue on the high holidays, and we would, celebrate the high holidays at home. But I never really had a deep connection to religion through that. And it's interesting because like I said, like I never knew myself to be connected to God in any particular way through my own religion, but I always viewed religion as the entry point to the connection to the divine. So I always kind of, Christianity, Catholicism, Judaism, to me, these were all that, like, I always knew them as these are the ways that you can be religious and be connected to God. But I didn't particularly have any connection myself through that. And I think that it really seems to be the case a lot with a lot of Reformed Jews, that there's more of just this identity that's formed around the culture of Judaism over and beyond the deeper religious elements of it. Although that seems to be changing a little bit, and there seems to be a rise in people more kind of coming back to the teachings and the wisdom that are the foundation of Judaism.
Ah. Yeah, it's interesting is I had a I was in a circle of friends some years ago, a woman there who was came from Jewish heritage, and she was inviting a group of us over almost every Friday, or maybe it was there's like I think there's one Shabbat of the month that's sort of like the high Shabbat, or maybe I'm not sure. But I just remember we would go over there for Shabbat, but it was a very particular Shabbat, and they would do the readings and have the foods, and the dinner took like 2.5 hours, and it was really beautiful. I really enjoyed it. But one thing I really got from that, and in conversations with her, was how much nature is not just in Judaism, but all the sort of like the big three religions, anyways, and most other ones. There is a huge component of nature that shows up in the teachings and the readings and the metaphors and stuff. And so I just want to kind of pull on that thread a little bit and then just ask you, because since we're on First Nature and this is about nature and this is all kind of folding back into that, and what would you say your connection to nature is, or how would you define nature connection? Let's start with that.
Well, I mean, just to kind of preface that by what you were talking about and how religion and how the main religions have these threads within them, speaking to nature and the importance of nature. The way I kind of always perceived religion was that God was separate from nature. God was something that was something to be connected to through the practice of this particular religion, and nature was a separate entity that existed within the greater landscape of all that exists. And through a lot of the practices and experiences that I've had in my life, I see that as a very as like it's a divisive kind of way of looking at the true essence of the divinity that lives within nature. So what it means to be connected to nature to me is understanding, the way that nature itself, all, physical living beings and nature itself is just the divine expressing itself in physical form. And that's more of the, I guess, belief system that I have these days as it pertains to, the physical world that I see around me and the divine. It's merely just an expression of the universe, wanting to experience itself in physical form. Definitely one of the topics that interests me and I spend a lot of time thinking about.
Yeah, great, because we're heading there. But first, just to kind of keep building out the context, what do you remember about what do you remember about nature from your childhood? What was your exposure to it? How did you sort of, what was your kind of awareness or interaction with it? What did you make of it? Any significant
Yeah.
experiences you remember having?
Well, it's like with everything in life, a lot of times the lessons are revealed down the road, and in hindsight, you can kind of see how things were actually being experienced in a way that was cultivating a much stronger understanding of something that at the time you probably didn't realize what it was. I think one of the first things for me that really comes up in my memory as a child is my time in Israel. Actually, we used to go there every other year. So when I was really young, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6, I don't have a lot of memories from that time in my life, but I do remember being at my grandparents' house in Israel, and my grandfather had this amazing, beautiful garden with all kinds of plants and flowers and plum trees, and these kind of ceramic sculptures and statues that he made, and fountains. And at the time, again, it was just kind of like, as a child, kind of running around in the garden and playing. And looking back on that, I remember how much awe I had spending hours in this huge garden and just kind of running around and playing and experiencing. And so that was one of the earliest memories I have of something that I think moved me in a way that I wasn't able to quite understand at the time. Um, and then, as I got a little older, actually, one of the more pivotal memories that I have from being a kid was, I think I was probably about 8 or 9 at this time. And my parents actually got separated. And I was living in North Carolina at the time, which is where I was born. And my mom took my sister and I to Atlanta, where my dad's parents were. And, there was just more available for us there. And I remember after we moved, there was this weird thing that I had where I would get homesick every time I tried to spend the night at a friend's house. And so I didn't understand where it was coming from because, all I wanted to do was like hang out and, play video games and then go to sleep and wake up in the morning and, do it again. And I knew that I wanted to stay there, but something would happen every single time without fail. By the time my friend would fall asleep, I'd have to go get his mom and tell her to call my mom to come pick me up, and I'd have to go home. And it really sucked. And, I didn't really know how to navigate it. And then one summer, my mom enrolled me in this summer camp that was, for a full month. And I mean, looking back, like, I don't know how either one of us was like on board with that, being that I hadn't even been able to like spend one night out on my own yet.
Right.
But somehow, that, that option came on the table. And so I guess I was open enough to it to try. And that experience changed my life. That first month that I, was away from my mom and my family and everything I knew, for an entire month in the mountains of Georgia with a bunch of other kids. And it, like my mom always says, the thing she remembers vividly from that experience was her crying, sending me off on the bus on the way out, because she felt so bad. And like, she was probably really looking forward to a month off, but, also was wondering what was going to happen. And then witnessing me coming off the bus, a month later, just the biggest smile on my face saying, I want to go, to 2 months next year, or whatever it was. And so that, again, it was one of those moments where at the time I didn't realize what was actually happening. I just understood it as this very, this just big experience that I was having where it was unlike anything that I'd had before. And looking back on it, though, I realized how it was something that has really, really created a powerful story for me around what's available in nature. And when you're, literally out, we would, have these, we had these cabins that we would stay in for the most part, but then every once a week or something, we do these campfires and go camping out under the trees. And so, yeah, something within that experience, I think, was probably one of the first things that shifted my understanding of our connection to nature, whether I knew it at the time or not.
Yeah, it is fascinating because I feel like so many of us have some kind of story like that, unless we grew up in the deep density of, city life. There's always some formative moment we look back on and we're like, I had no idea that was what I was getting at the time. And it makes me think about the importance of getting youth and children out into exposure, of nature if they don't have it. And if they do have it, how much can we get them out there? Because, I reflecting on my own life, I was raised rurally on a small farm and I was outside all the time. And same thing, didn't know what I got until later in life. And one of the things I recognized for myself, which I'll ask you about you next, was, when do you think you started to recognize that there were some gifts in there, getting on into, I don't know, teenager, college life, did something start to help you sort of realize what those times may have brought to you, and or was there any mentors that showed up along the way that started to kind of bring some awareness to you around the value of being out in nature, or was it just something that just one day you turned around and were like, oh, that was actually really important?
I mean, as far as I can remember, I think that those experiences were pretty profound in my life at that time, but it wasn't until much later in my life that the idea of nature being this inherent divine energy that we have this inherent connection to, um, came through for me. So even like what we were just talking about, how so many kids have that opportunity but don't realize at the time what it is that's happening or what it means. It made me think about how there's such an opportunity, I think, for these types of experiences for kids, but with a little bit of an educational element to it. So, most of the time summer camp is really all about just being out there and experiencing and all the things, and it's beautiful. But if there was some way to actually kind of bring that awareness at that point and to really kind of cultivate a deeper understanding for what this means and why does it feel so good, and what are the ways in which, we can find a deeper connection to want to help be stewards for the planet. I think that would be such an amazing, amazing gift and experience for kids. For me, I don't think that my deeper awareness and connection to nature really fully came about until my first experience with ayahuasca in my early 30s. There had been plenty of opportunities that had come up before then where I would go on these solo road trips up the coast of California and just have the most amazing experience and just know that it was in nature, especially when I was by myself, that I felt so alive. And that would be something that was there available for me on the surface, but there wasn't much of an understanding of anything deeper. And I don't think there was even much of a desire to want to know or need to know any more than that. It's kind of just like, well, I'm getting fresh air, it's like, right, fresh air does the body good. So yeah, I don't think it was until my first experience with plant medicine until that conversation really began to deepen a little more.
Yeah. So let's move into that conversation then. Your nature connection awareness comes to people in a lot of different ways. Excuse me, let me take a drink of water. And there's I feel like plant medicine has been growing in awareness. I feel like a lot of people know about it now. It's becoming more accepted as a viable pathway to deepening one's spiritual path. I personally am tickled that it's plant medicine and not just texts, ancient teachings off the page. So I'm just curious to hear, okay, so you got that part of your childhood, and then it wasn't, then it was just something you were like, nature's great for everybody, and then you heard about this thing, you got curious, and how did you end up deciding that that was a pathway for you to pursue?
Well, what's interesting is it was around that time in my life where I was kind of in one of the most stable points in my life from a career perspective. I was in a corporate sales job. I had a bachelor pad down at the beach in Venice. Had a 401k and a savings account and a nice car and all the things. And the pivotal shift for me came when I one day just all of a sudden realized that I needed to leave. And why that was so crazy is because I had worked my way up in this particular job to where I wasn't actually even doing a whole lot anymore. I had kind of built these relationships with accounts that I managed, and I had kind of laid enough of the groundwork to where I would just get a lot of residual commissions that would come in. And there was a part of me that kind of lost a bit of my fire to actively pursue. And, there was a little bit of a laziness that I think crept in. But, to a lot of people, I think that, to be in that space where you're making a ton of money. You're not actually having to do a lot. So there's actually time to like maybe explore, something else on the side. And while I continue to get paid by this big company to support my life, I can pursue other things and see what I like. But the voice was as clear as it could possibly be, that it was like, no, it's time to leave,
Wow.
the comfort of the home. This was the moment of my, the Joseph Campbell's, hero's journey. This was really the point of the like leaving the comfort of everything that I knew at that point to seek out whatever it was that was calling me. And ayahuasca, the conversation happened to be floating around quite a bit at that time, and so that was a big integral part in that decision.
Right, and then not to go too deeply into that experience, and it sounds like you've done ayahuasca, more than once, and maybe some other things. But what would you say is the general, how does that inform you? Like, what are you getting? What are you realizing as you go through these series of uh, experiences, with plant medicine?
It's different every time, but I think that the first one really, that was the main experience that kind of really pulled back the curtain and illuminated um, just this tangible feeling of how everything is interconnected to me. Not just this idea of it or this concept, but like even specifically visually being able to see it and witness it in the trees and in all of the life that was breathing as this one coherent system together. That was one of the most revealing things that came through in that first experience for me. And it was really probably the first time that the idea of our inherent connection to nature and that deeper understanding of how the everything that I knew to be God up until that point was living and breathing all around us, was what really kind of pushed me onto the path to kind of really start pulling on all these threads and trying to deepen my understanding of like, what does that mean, and where do I go from here. So yeah,
So,
but every single opportunity since then has been different.
yeah. So where did you go from there once you had that realization and that reconnection?
Yeah, so it's funny because I always think about how, you know, I think even at the time I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know where I'm going, but I know that I'm supposed to be leaving. So I know that I'm going to be. I feel so confident in this idea that where I'm supposed to be going is away from here. So I know that I'll be guided in the right direction. And I literally fumbled around and continue to fumble in many ways. Um, you know, Finding my place and finding the uh, what's the word? It's not necessarily the purpose, but I think that I had this story or this idea that in leaving this world behind that I knew wasn't serving me anymore, immediately the doors would open to the places where I was supposed to go. I remember specifically one of the career paths, one of the jobs that I thought at the time just felt really deeply like this was the thing that I really wanted to do, was to open a restaurant. And there was I had started to deepen my connection to just my own health and prioritizing my health and nutrition at that time. And I came across this franchise restaurant concept based out of Canada. It's kind of like a Chipotle, but for like healthy food, salads, wraps, bowls, smoothies, fresh juice, all that. And I thought, what a great opportunity to be able to do something that I'm actually passionate about and that can help serve others. And so I, basically put everything I had into this restaurant, to to open this location. And this was right at the exact same time when my ex-wife now at the time and I had our twins. So I have now 7-year-old twins. But when I opened the doors to that restaurant, the twins had just been born a month before. So, I joke around a lot about that whole first year having literally no memory from that period of my life because, I was open to close every single day, 7 days a week for at least the first 4 months, plus newborn twins at home. So that was a real test on so many levels. But, I ended up realizing it wasn't the right thing for me. I mean, the restaurant industry is brutal for anyone that's ever been involved with that. And there was just a number of reasons why it wasn't going to work, just even from the way it was being supported by the higher ups. Thankfully, I was able to sell that restaurant after a couple of years and not take a complete loss on it. But, within that period of time, while I was, just neck deep in all things life with newborn twins and new business, I had continued to deepen my practice with plant medicine, and it ended up with an experience of me down in Peru, getting an opportunity to work with ayahuasca in the Amazon, and that's when I think something really shifted pretty powerfully for me in realizing, knowing that the restaurant thing wasn't what I really wanted to do, and feeling this kind of really deep calling to want to support what was happening in the Amazon at that time, as I was learning more and more about the environmental impact of everything that was happening. And so that was kind of when the first seed of an idea was planted to create a business that could help support the conservation of the Amazon. And but that journey, like I said, leaving the comfort of the original corporate job and finding my way along this path that just has been anything but a clear cut, like I knew for sure this was the right thing because this is where I was meant to go. That being said, I do feel that, every step of the journey has led me exactly to where I am today, which is exactly where I need to be. But it's never been easy, and it's never been very straightforward to getting to where I am now.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of a couple of different allegories. One is there's I think Alan Watts tells it one of his books that I read years ago about a master, a student coming to his Zen master and asking him, how will he know if he's on his one true path? And his master says, walking your one true path is like walking out into a field of fresh fallen snow. It's like you make it as you walk it. There is no pre-established path. It's the one you actually blaze through your life. That is the true path. That one, I come back to that one a lot because similarly, and I just think also just because of, obviously we got climate crisis going on. We're still kind of struggling through this pandemic. Our country's economic situation is a disaster. Our government's like completely absorbed with itself in this investigation. So much is going on right now. And so many of the circles that I'm in, as far as friends and connections, it does feel like there's just this unraveling. There's an unraveling happening, and I don't say that as a negative thing. I just say that that's how it appears to me. It's like we had this very tightly wound, well laid, cable that supposedly went from A to B if you got on track. And we're getting to see now that actually that cable's split open and unraveling, and there's these ends that are just kind of like going in all directions. And I feel like there's so many of us who are starting to find our one true path, realizing that there isn't this one trajectory that we're all on. We're all on these different little mini trajectories. And to come back to Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey, a big part of that story, as you know, is following that thread to the end, going out the thread to that tip of that thread that no one else has gone out to, seeing what the gift is there, and then bringing it back to share with the people to, make everyone's life better. And so yeah, I'd like to kind of just tap into that about how going to Peru and just being there in South America a few times and seeing what you saw. First, I'd love to know just how did that, 'cause you talk about on your website, which we're going to go into in a few minutes, about I think it was Ecuador where you're talking about seeing these pipelines and this crab-like machine just sucking oil straight out the
Mm,
ground, and then right there
yeah,
is just these tribal peoples who've been living there for tens of thousands of years, and seeing that their way of
yeah.
life getting, so not so much I'm not looking forward so much of the what does it mean, but just how the fuck did that affect you? I mean, I
I
put
mean,
myself in that
yeah.
situation. I don't know if I could even grok it. It's so intensely.
Yeah, that was the moment. Like that was the catalyzing moment that really shaped the direction that I would end up going in. This business that I have now that's oriented around the protection of the Amazon. Before that time, it was just loose ideas kind of floating around of how I can kind of create a social enterprise and do some good for the world. But it was at that point, I mean, it was a ceremony just being there, completely sober, the most sober I think I may have ever felt in my life, witnessing what I saw, which was, this oil block, which is, yeah, this big kind of crab like machine. It actually looked very, it had this very just like imposing evil kind of look to it, even just as a machine. Like it had like arms that were going into the ground and just sucking the oil out of the ground and then being transported out along these pipes all along the road, the dirt road out of the Amazon. Um, but you know, to witness that anyway, just in a pristine, um, biodiverse type of geography would be, polarizing enough on its own. But the fact that it was so deep, all the way into the Amazon, literally a football field away from an indigenous village where they were living without electricity, yet there was this massive, enterprise raping the land and doing so without any sort of responsibility at all. Whether or not that could be done in a responsible way, I mean, at the very least, having some sort of um, consolation to offer to these people, but these people were given nothing in exchange for their land. And so it was just really sobering because I remember there was a point where I was standing right outside the fence of this oil block and I could hear the machine pumping right behind me. And then, I turn in the other direction and I can literally hear the birds in the canopy of the Amazon coming from that side. And it really changed everything for me. It really was the point where I really started to understand all of the things that had been coming through, the ceremonies and the deepening of my connection and all of our inherent connection to nature in the way that this is the analogy of how we are operating. Like this is the full representation of man's complete disregard for our life itself and being willing to literally, destroy the very essence of our life here in the pursuit of, greed, money, overconsumption of resources. So yeah, that was a real pivotal moment for me when it really woke something up for wanting to do something more with what I was already doing.
Right, right. So let's go into that a little bit then. What was it that so you go down there, you have this, reckoning with, oh shit, this is going down, and you have some ideas, but then you get back home and it's like, all right, step one, and again, I'm not asking this from like, how do you build a business, Danny? But more from, following that passion, following that spiritual intuitive knowing of like, this is what I have to do, following all the things that you had to change in your life to redirect it to accomplishing this vision you had. So it's more just coming from that personal experience of like, I'm human. This is how humans work. This is my reflection and response to the world that supports me, the planet that supports me. So that's really what I'm kind of wanting to know about, like just how did that, or just that internal process. And maybe you've never really thought about it that way. So if it's kind of, stopping
Yeah,
growth
I
for you,
mean,
that's fine. But
it is something that I've thought about and I continue to think about because it doesn't feel like I'll ever really get to a place of reconciliation because, we are the world has changed. The world has changed, and the way in which we operate on this planet, to support the billions of people that live here, is just the systems, the broken systems that are in place. Um, they, I 100% they need to be dismantled and replaced by ones that can serve and steward a healthy planet and a reliable future for all of us. But at the same time, it's like, you know, every day I find myself doing things that I feel are out of necessity for just how our life has been set up. And, can I sell my car, and just ride my bike everywhere? Probably not. So it's this constant process of trying to figure out just what can I do? Like what is within my power to do, especially within this company. And I think the biggest thing that was illuminated while, with my time in Ecuador is just seeing how abundant and how full of joy and how much life these indigenous communities had with what we would consider nothing. And, it literally changed the idea of the paradigm of what it means to need,
yeah. So
and what
how do you explain
yeah,
that to yourself? Because I find that fascinating too. Because I know in my own life, I think about like there's so much stuff I have right now, and I downsized a lot to live where I'm living now,
yeah.
and but still, I look around, I'm thinking there's all this stuff I got. I'm not particularly joyful in my life, but I have this sort of like, I don't know if I can get rid of that, and then to see these other people, like you're saying, and to know there's been times where I've been out, doing, kind of survival style camping, or even when you go out to do the fast, where you literally have just enough to keep you warm and some water, and this
Yeah.
great, sense of peace and calm and reconciliation comes over us. So I'm just curious, like, how do you wake up every day and know that you're living a life that's sitting on top of all these resources in order to do the thing you want to do the most, which is eliminate the way that we use all these resources so that we can, preserve these
It's
communities and these people.
it's hard. It's hard. There's no kind of easy answer to that for me, especially because, on many days I still wake up, really feeling the collective grief of the planet. And I think that that's actually been one of the things that, I've recognized the most through all of these experiences is how this collective suffering that a lot of us are going through is directly connected to the experience of how we live on this planet. I don't I don't know who is attributed to the quote, but someone said something to the effect of like any harm that we inflict upon the planet, we inflict upon ourselves. And that understanding of you know it's really it's tough because sometimes you wonder like are we just masochistic, like do we do even knowing that, understanding that deeply, and yet continuing to operate in a similar way that we know is detrimental to our own personal well-being. So every day for me is really the focus. It always, I realize anytime I think too far out into the big picture vision of what it is that I'm trying to create, it's at that point that I get completely overwhelmed and it feels very heavy. So
Yeah.
it always, the practice for me is always just coming back, to what's right in front of me and keeping it very focused on, what are the things I can do in this moment, in regards to my own health and my own well-being and the way that I show up in the world. And then really making sure I'm staying connected to the why of the organization too, which a large part of is to support these indigenous artisan communities. And when I start to think too much about all the logistics and the business, and I kind of get lost. But every time I have a call or a conversation with one of my contacts down there, and I just tap back into them and the spirit of what they're doing there, and the joy and the gratitude they have for any little thing that I'm able to send at any point. It's like this is the fuel, this is the motivation to keep going, simply to be connected into that wisdom that they have, and the receiving and the giving that I'm able to have from being able to support them.
Yeah, I mean, that's such a beautiful relationship you've gotten to cultivate. So let's go into so you come back, you have this awakening and this realization that something needs to be done. And now there's this entity called OMA. And so talk about like how you came to the conclusion that this would be the best way to start as far as getting something, doing something effective now as opposed to something really effective later. And what did it take to sort of make those connections with the people down there and to build those relationships to where there was some equanimity involved on both sides?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting because a lot of times you see businesses and you see businesses that have achieved a certain level of success, and it always just seems like it was really easy for them to get to where they got because it just seems like it makes so much sense to you, and you never really know the origin story of a lot of these companies and how they got to where they are. But OMA wasn't OMA when it started. There was a different name for the company. It was a different product. All I knew was that, through the same one-for-one model that Tom's Shoes really kind of championed and created a whole new generation of social enterprises that were utilizing this one-for-one model. In my deepening of my connection to the Amazon specifically, and connecting with an organization called Rainforest Trust, which is one of the highest rated organizations that is doing conservation in that space, it became clear that you could purchase and protect an acre of rainforest for as little as like $1 or $2 in many of these areas, which just seemed insane to me. But the kind of business brain kind of kicked in and was like, okay, well, that's a number that can fit within the margin of a product. What product can I create to really be able to build this offering that could support, an acre of rainforest being able to be protected for every product purchase. And like I said, it went through many different iterations, but it was only until it was really my first trip to Peru where the idea that like, this needs to be bigger than selling stuff. Like, as a matter of fact, I think that the problem in the social enterprise space now is that the give back has really been used as a greenwashing technique by a lot of companies to say, buy this thing and we'll plant a tree. And most people don't understand that the cost from a lot of these big organizations that are doing a lot of good doing tree planting around the world can be as little as 10 cents. So, you could be buying, this product for $50 or whatever it is. And, you're planting one tree with nominal proceeds from that. But what is the thing? Like, what is the thing that's being purchased? What is the impact on the environment to have that thing manufactured, shipped, all of those things? So in being down in South America and really recognizing that the heart and soul of this project is not going to be about the impact and the donations made. It needs to be about supporting the people that live here in a way that in itself can combat deforestation. Because a big thing that I don't think a lot of people realize is that one of the biggest tools for fighting deforestation in the Amazon is simply empowering those communities with work. It's kind of crazy to think, but a lot of times, the indigenous people themselves will resort to resource extraction, like cutting down trees or mining or whatever it is, because there's no other way to put food on the table. So if we can kind of change that and create a new economy in a way that is actually, done in a fair trade way and is genuinely done in integrity to support these communities and creating business opportunities for them to utilize the land as opposed to extracting and destroying it, that by itself, if I didn't have any element to my business that we donate to Rainforest Trust after every product sold, it in itself would still be advocating and promoting conservation of the land just in the entity itself, creating job opportunities for these people. So it was kind of understanding that and learning more about that, that really changed the scope of what the heart and soul of the company would really be.
Right, right. And so then how did you, so you got clear on that. I mean, you did your research, obviously, had some conversations, and then clearly you had some connections just because you had been down there to visit for these ceremonies. And was it the Rainforest Foundation? Is that what the
Rainforest Trust,
Trust Foundation? So contact with them. So how did you zero in on the product, which I think primarily is these bracelets that are made down there.
yeah.
And so
So
who
there,
did you need to talk to, and how, how much boots on the ground did you personally have in just figuring that piece out?
it was all boots on the ground. The inspiration actually came because at the time when I was, looking to kind of pivot from what I was doing with the company at that point, there was a brand. It's called 4Ocean, that had this business model where they were cleaning a lot of this plastic trash out of the ocean in Bali, and and they were repurposing it and kind of created a similar model where every bracelet that they sold, they were able to pull a pound of trash out of the ocean. So that was actually kind of like, they were kind of like the inspiration to utilize that similar model, but in my opinion, in a much more direct way, to not only support these communities that lived in the areas we were working to protect, but by utilizing natural regenerative materials that, the entire bracelet would be biodegradable. Whereas, there's a challenge that I have when it comes to a lot of the recycling kind of environmental stuff, because at the end of the day, you can recycle plastic into a bracelet, but that bracelet is still made out of plastic. Right. And at the end of its life cycle, it's going to still go to a landfill. So, yeah, I mean, it was all boots on the ground, kind of talking with these artisans, looking at the various different bracelets that they made, or jewelry, and all the other artisan products, and then coming across this material called tagua, which is native to Ecuador, and it's basically known as eco ivory. It's a nut that grows on palm trees down there, and it essentially has the same look and feel as elephant ivory. So, again, that in itself is helping to steward a reimagining of an industry that is completely destructive to a species that's on the brink of extinction. So there was so many different pieces to it. There's this amazing material that can be utilized to help combat the ivory trade, and there's these amazing groups of artisans that this particular idea can support and have a ripple effect on protecting the rainforest. And on top of that, we can do more. So it just kind of was a natural progression of just figuring out. And to be honest, I'm still figuring out. Like, one of the biggest things I'm kind of going through my left brain critical kind of trying to figure out what it needs to look like is kind of creating new types of bracelets that obviously, will still serve the the all of the areas that we're serving with the materials and the artisans, but that will appeal to a larger demographic so that we can truly make an impact at scale. That's been the biggest challenge for me, is having to embody that entrepreneurial side of things, where I do have to figure out the business, email marketing, advertising, all the things, where in reality, like, all I want to do is just be in Ecuador and working with these communities face to face.
Yeah, I feel like that's a little bit of the karmic bite in the ass for us first worlders, who are waking up from our life of relative luxury and want to do something about it. And there's so much, there's so many facades and veils and throughputs we have to go through just to do the thing. I find that personally exhausting, just with oh my God, all the pieces, that we have to do for
Yeah.
each other just so we can get each other enrolled in things.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so a big
so
part of that journey for me now is just in connecting, finding people that I can connect to, because I have a massive vision for this project, and I've seen it, and I know it's attainable. I know it's more than attainable. I've seen so many other companies that have taken an approach that's completely out of integrity. Mass producing junk from
yeah,
China,
tchotchkes.
and tacking on a little social give back to it, and really doing more harm than good. So I know it's possible. I know it's happening, and now it's just a matter of just keeping my why in front of me, and making connections and connecting with the right people, and yeah, trying to keep the future of the planet for my children, and all of these amazing people that I've met along the way at the forefront of my mind. Anytime I start to get caught up in the minutia of stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I'm really impressed just by not only the product and how the product's made and sourced, but also you guys have uh, um, the packaging, zero waste packaging, which is great. But then you also have carbon neutral shipping, and I haven't really heard so much about that as a thing. I know it's out there, but I'm just curious. This is maybe a little off on a tangent on my own curiosity, but how did you figure that out, and how does that work, carbon neutral shipping?
So the carbon neutral shipping is actually done through a particular third party uh, shipper called Sendle, and I think the way that they work is they essentially create carbon offset credits by doing tree planting of their own for any of the carbon emissions that happen through shipping. I mean, that's the one element that, no matter how you know environmentally friendly you create anything, at the end of the day, if you have to ship it, there's going to be some element of a detrimental impact on the environment. So yeah, this company is doing amazing things. It's allowing people to kind of ship their products while also offsetting any of the impact through a lot of their own environmental contributions.
Yeah, well, I appreciate they're doing a lot of their own work, because I feel like that's where a lot of the benefit kind of gets washed out, is people contracting other people saying, "Hey, we're gonna do this thing," and then say, "Okay, you'll do it for us," but then it doesn't really get
Yeah,
done, or it gets done in a shady way. And so I definitely can respect a company that's saying, "We'll do it ourselves." That's
yeah,
good to know. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I mean,
Um,
I really like it. Just again, I think seeing how a lot of these other organizations were doing things out of integrity with whatever it was, whether it's the advertising in an unscrupulous way, or just there's always these little things that I'm like, I could never take that approach. But I think that all of those things were what really pushed me to really want to like cover all the bases and really ensure that the the offering was as as committed to the overall impact as possible. in the packaging, the shipping, and everything included.
Yeah, that's really great, Danny. I fully appreciate that kind of dedication, Um, so let's talk a little bit about the goal of the project right now. It's the 1 million acre goal. So just talk a little bit about how you came up with that number and what does that number represent to those people? Are there any kind of, any data points about like what impact preserving a million acres of rainforest does, or, just tell us a little more about how that's going and what inspired that number.
Yeah, I mean, the idea of 1 million acres was just something that came through. And what's really interesting is that I had no idea at the time, but the word Oma in many different languages around the world actually means grandmother.
Uh-huh.
And in the world of plant medicine, ayahuasca is commonly known as the grandmother spirit. And I think it's really interesting that the idea of Oma was kind of brought through in one of these ceremonies for me. So um, the number itself is pretty arbitrary. I think that as the business continues to grow, I'm really looking to expand our support of other organizations as well, that are working to help protect various different, endangered species, wildlife. Um, I think that the big vision for OMA is to be able to create a platform that really inspires people and advocates the deeper knowledge that of some of the stuff that we were talking about earlier, our connection to nature, ways in which people can get involved and deepen their connection through a lot of the practices like a fast in the desert or some of these other things. So the surface level goal is, yes, to continue doing the work to support these communities while donating towards conservation for the rainforest. But the types of projects, the impact projects that we'll support as we go forward will continue to grow and, work with other types of organizations all along the spectrum in the environmental space. So yeah, I mean, the 1 million acres is for sure a milestone that, at which point it will be reached, it will be amazing. But OMA is really the spirit of the organization in that it is in service to Mother Earth and grandmother spirit in our, in its in entirety and totality of all life that exists here.
Yeah, I love that, man. That is kind of fun how OMA works out as the acronym.
Yeah.
Um, where are you guys at presently on that path to a million?
Um, the last time we've kind of done, I think it was about 15,000 acres at one point, the last time, and we're pushing on to the 20,000 acre mark now. So definitely just getting started in the process.
Yeah, and how long has this campaign been going, roughly?
OMA, as it is today, in its kind of current iteration, I've been doing it for about 2 years.
Okay. So yeah, a million acres, that could take a while at the current rate. So as you said, you're definitely dreaming up ways to move this along. Let's assume something really amazing happens, which it will, and the a million acres is hit. What is that? I'm sure you've kind of imagined that point, and then um, what does that empower you and the people there who are benefiting from owning that land to do next? What's the stepping stone?
Yeah, I mean, kind of recognizing how much gets to happen from now until the point where we've contributed enough to protect 1 million acres. I realized that at that point that we were to cross that threshold, the the company will have expanded enough, and the platform will be will have reached enough people. Where at that point, I see it being so much more than just a project that's goal was to protect 1 million acres of rainforest. Again, um, the what's next or the bigger vision has always been and will continue to be, deepening the discussion around ways in which we can support the earth, support all those that we share the planet with, whether it's in creating economic opportunities for these artisans or creating experiences. There's the idea is to have a big enough platform to be able to share more of these types of stories and kind of offer more of the indigenous wisdom that's coming out of these areas that we're working with to inspire the next generation to kind of change the way they view how we exist on the planet and what each one of our roles can be here. I think it's very easy to get caught up in the what I do doesn't matter. I can't make a difference. What picking up one piece of trash isn't going to do anything. But very conversely to that, every little thing matters and can have a ripple effect. And if people can be inspired to just do one little thing, even if it's like that, just you're on a hike and instead of walking past the trash this time, you pick up that one piece of trash, even if it's one time, just really deepening into the understanding that every little choice we make can have a big ripple effect.
Yeah, I like that a lot, Danny. I know that I can fall into the pit of anger and then despair walking out in beautiful places and seeing trash. Like the first thing I do is I just get mad. I'm just like, who in the hell?
Yeah.
And
Invited this guy.
Yeah. It takes me a while to get past the person that did it and get to well, can I just care for the earth? Whatever, this person did this, whatever. And there's no way to, like, me leaving that piece of trash there has no effect whatsoever on who that person is and why they left trash there. They may not even know that. I mean, I know I've left trash some places that I don't know I've left. It just happens. Shit falls out of your pocket, whatever. I remember I was driving down the highway once in a pickup truck and moving fast, like 70, 75 miles an hour. It was pretty busy, lots of cars. There was probably like 4 or 5 miles between exits. And I saw something fly out of the back of my truck. I don't remember what it was. It's like some plastics, cardboardy thing. And I was like, oh, shit. And I felt so bad. But also I tell myself, there's no way in hell I'm going to drive 6 miles, 6 minutes up the highway, take the exit, come back down.
Stop in the middle of the freeway.
Stop in the middle and find a way to, that just doesn't happen, And so I recognize that there's a piece for me just being reminded that for step one, just get past the anger. Feel it, but not to act on it. Because for me, acting on the anger in those moments means I'm not picking up that trash. It's not mine. But then getting past that to well, I am going to pick up this trash because I love the earth. I care about the earth. Like you're saying, I think there's a big teaching to be had in doing those little small things begins to reprogram how we, our belief systems, our values, like all that stuff comes up for, rediscovery and when we just take those little actions, even if it's uncomfortable or annoying, just the physical act of it. Something you said earlier about embodiment, I feel like is a big part of it. Like sometimes our mind doesn't have to understand. We just have to ask our bodies to do the thing.
Yeah. And I think it's also a really good practice in releasing shame and guilt around, not doing it. That's been the thing for me sometimes. It's like, what? Like I just walked past that piece of trash. And now I'm thinking about it for the next few minutes and what, it was so easy. And instead of allowing that to create the story that I am just this kind of person that is lazy or not willing to do my part, it's literally as simple as, okay, but guess what? If I walk by 9 pieces of trash and pick up the 10th piece of trash, on the 10th hike or whatever it is, I still picked up one more piece of trash than I would have if I didn't do anything. And every little incremental thing, definitely compounds on itself. And I think that, it's getting stuck on who the person that did it was, as opposed to really just feeling into who am I? How do I show up in the world? What is the type of person that I'm committed to being, and the integrity that I'm claiming to walk this earth with, really gets to be the main focus to allow people to feel a little bit more capable and effective with anything that they do, even if it's one little thing.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Well, this has been great, Danny. I just want to wrap up with one more question, and then we'll kind of head to a close. But and I know you said earlier, you kind of discipline yourself not to get too caught up in the big picture. But I'm gonna ask you a big picture question.
Okay. I'll try not to get caught up in that.
Yeah, I mean, you got two kids, two, I think you said they're boys, right? Twins?
A boy and a girl.
A boy and a girl, right?
Yeah.
So, they're 7, and in another 10 to 15 years, they're going to be walking around out in the world that, whatever we've done with it in the next, 10 to 15 years. So I'm just curious to hear a little bit about how you hold, I mean, I get it. You get up every day, you're contending with email and phones and taking meetings and all this stuff, that it takes just to get, people aware of these ideas. And then you go home and there's your kids. So what do I don't know what the question is, but there's just a legacy piece. There's a generational piece. There's a time piece with what they say, what we're headed for and the time we're headed for. But how do you just kind of hold that, for yourself around what do you hope realistically, if that's the right word, that you are able to bequeath to your children as far as like what you did and the world that you think we can create, or rectify in the next 1 to 2 decades?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a good question and something that I obviously think about a lot. One of the most impactful things that was ever communicated to me around this specifically, and it also pertains to my business as well. It was actually during a San Pedro ceremony that I did in Ecuador, and there was an opportunity at the kind of towards the end of it where each one of us had the chance to kind of sit across the fire from the shaman and kind of deepen into something that was being called to explore on a deeper level. And I forgot how it started, but she's basically asking me, somehow the line of questioning came to, do you believe that I think I had expressed, like, I don't feel that I'm scared for the future of this planet because I don't feel that we are going to be able to do what we need to do to save ourselves. And she said, well, why do you believe that? Do you believe that people are inherently good? And I remember saying, like, I have these circles of people that I am blessed to be able to connect with. And so I know that around the world, there are so many people that are good and, will do what's right in any given moment. But looking out at the big picture, to be able to witness the atrocities and the capacity that man has to literally violently destroy each other with no regard makes me feel like, on a big picture scale, that we do not ultimately have what it takes to do what we need to do to save ourselves from ourselves. And I remember she looked at me and she said, do you think that if you believe that to be the case, you have a company where your mission and your message is for the world to come together to help protect the rainforest and beyond? She said, do you believe that if your current idea of humanity is that we don't care enough about anything to actually do what's right, that you will succeed in your business? Do you feel that you will be able to reach your goal if this is what you believe about humanity? And I just like tears started flowing through my eyes, and I really just like had this deep awareness around like I I can't continue to operate in the world with the story and the idea that we ultimately will fail. Ultimately, from a big picture perspective, humanity does not have what it needs in order to self-destruct, especially when I've seen so much of the opposite of that to be true in my direct experience. Everything around me directly tells me otherwise. And yet when I kind of go online on the internet and I see all the stuff, that's when it's like, there's no way. The fact that this one thing is happening is indication that we're done, we're fucked. There's no way. And so that literally changed my perspective from that moment forward to really make sure that I was constantly checking in with myself and checking in with my story of what I believe to be true about our capacity for love and for connection and for responsibility and for doing the right thing. And I'd be lying if I said, that I shifted my belief and now it's like that's the path that I believe to be true every day now. That story constantly comes back and haunts me when I see a lot of the other things happening. But the big lesson in that for me has been it's a choice. It's always a choice. And at the end of the day, if I keep coming back to the idea that there is a lot of things happening that you're not going to see broadcast through mainstream media all over the news because fear sells, and that's what the majority of a big part of the population is addicted to. But knowing that there's an uprising that's happening as we speak, and really connecting deeper into that, and just remembering that, like, as long as I know that that's happening, the only thing I need to do is to continue to do my part in that and not get caught up in the minutia. And when it involves my children, it's just doing what's right in front of me. Like if I get too deep into the story that like my kids, like I'm so scared to think about the world that is going to be here for my kids by the time they get older. It's a crippling, paralyzing, and overwhelming idea. So I just choose to focus as much as my attention on the, as Charles Eisenstein says, the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible. And, just do my best to give my little contribution to that as best I can.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that, Danny. I could take a note from that because I definitely get so hung up in the big picture. And I see how that definitely creates lots of opportunities I don't say yes to or act on because I'm too stuck on like, for what? So I guess kids will do that to you.
100%.
Yeah, yeah. All right, folks. So the website is omaearth.com. That's OMA earth.com. There's handmade bracelets. I think there's two different versions on there. And also some
Yeah.
t-shirts and sweatshirts if you want to get some branding on there to show the world.
Yeah, and we'll get a few other artisan products, kind of working on expanding some of the other offerings from the artisan communities. So stay tuned.
Yeah, 100% biodegradable, made from all natural. Is everything pretty much handmade? They hand carve the beads, or they have some ways to do that? Or
well, they have machines, but it's not a big factory. It's these little table saws that they're using, out on this wooden table that they've constructed. So
yeah, great.
Yeah.
Yeah, Danny, thanks so much. It's great. It was great meeting you when you came out to do the rite of passage. And that was just the last final thing. What do you want to share anything about how that ceremony has informed you on where things are headed now for you, as far as what did you get out there?
Yeah, I mean, that was for sure one of the more pivotal moments in my life that really deepened the connection, deepened my connection to nature in a more beautiful way. I spent pretty much the entirety of my last day just naked on the land, and channeled a really beautiful story through me as I lay under a tree. That I had this very deep, powerful vision of myself as a child running naked through a field, and just that the remembrance of that, as if it was an experience that I actually had. Like it wasn't a memory that I had from my actual childhood, but it was a memory of an experience that I've had at some point, whether in this lifetime or another, that didn't feel like I was thinking of a story or something. This was somewhere that I had been before. And so it was a very, very profound moment for me of just remembering what it felt like to kind of run naked on the earth as a child, free from judgment, free from, story of all the things that we collect along the way. And it just, in some very deep, energetic way beyond what I understand through language, it opened up a new level of just what's possible, what's available out in nature in our raw primal form. There's so much healing, there's so much healing available right outside our doors, and we just have to be willing to just show up and get still and just kind of sit with our thoughts in those spaces, and so much can come through and move through, just by allowing ourselves to like take a pause and take a break from all the stuff. So yeah, that was one of my big reminders to, not let those opportunities slip, because they do every day, every week. It takes work to allow yourself the space to go there, to do that. So I'm working on that one still, for sure.
Yeah, well, we all are, and it's one last thing before we close. What that really reminded me of, I'm definitely aware that there are indigenous communities out there who, I think about the Aborigines in Australia in particular, because they say that they have been living pretty much the same lifestyle for over 40,000 years.
Mm.
And what blows me away is like, so how are they seeing the world differently? What vision are they staying so connected to, or experience that they're staying so connected to, such as the memory of running naked through a field, which they probably do as adults, that is so fulfilling and so peaceful that the modern world that the rest of us has built up is not that attractive to them. And the same way you're saying that there's these indigenous villages down in Ecuador or anywhere in South America where there's massive amounts of corporate, wealth and pursuit of, power and convenience and luxury that's just being taken out of the ground right next to them. And somehow they're not particularly, I mean, I know that there's attrition that happens because, like you said, when a way of life is taken away, you have to figure out a different way to do it. And if you can't beat them, join them, I think is in the end what kind of takes those people down. But still, there's this perseverance of, this is the way we've always lived. This is the way we want to live. It's still, in their perspective, more fulfilling and more, human to live those ways. And that's one mystery that I'm still trying to figure out, is like, what is their psychology that keeps them so potently subscribed to that indigenous way of being that the rest of us have lost.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's really, yeah, it's interesting to think, is it an inherent knowing that they don't even need to experience this other thing first? They already know, just based on this ancient indigenous wisdom. Is it, hearing the stories? I can only imagine, like if a healer in these indigenous communities that's running an ayahuasca retreat, the like stories you hear from these city people coming in and talking about all of the shit that they're bringing in with them. Like, is that enough for them? Like, no, we're good. We're good. Right. We're going to stay here.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I imagine, yeah, there's it's possible that it's enough. Like, it's I think there's a whole other conversation that can be had around the pursuit of more. You know, what more do I need? Like, what else do I need other than what I have right here? That's such a Western idea,
Mhm.
So I think that maybe that's even a place that they really kind of go deep into, is like, what more do I need than what I have right now? Why would I want to go anywhere else? This is, especially when you understand, like, the deep connection of the divine within the most biodiverse place on earth. You know,
Yeah.
maybe they just know that, like, why would I leave paradise?
Right.
So yeah, it's an interesting one.
It is. Well, that pretty much brings us full circle to where we
Yeah,
started. So it's a great place to wrap with you, man. And I just want to say thanks again for coming on and sharing your journey and your experience. And yeah, super inspired by really getting the full story on how you got to what you're up to and what you are up to presently and how it's going. So yeah, thank you, Danny.
yeah. Likewise, yeah. I really appreciate it. It's awesome getting to connect through Compass, and yeah, looking forward to continuing and exploring more.
Awesome. And for those listeners out there, omaearth.com, check it out. Your simple, easy purchase can save an acre of rainforest just like that by pushing the button.
Yep,
Uh,
let's go.
we'll, yeah, we'll see y'all next time. Thanks again, Danny.
Appreciate you, man.